Before we get a little bit deeper into the TPP, I want to just go over some of the myths that you write about in terms of what the implications of this ruling are, and talk about because these myths that you debunk as Novartis comes out and says, this is going to wreak havoc on our ability to develop new medicines and whatnot. I want to talk about which ones of those also apply to the U.S. because in this country, we are engaged in a period of austerity. There is being more pushes for austerity under the rubric of a debt crisis. This debt crisis, to the extent that we have a debt issue at all going forward into the future, is very much driven by healthcare costs. And the healthcare costs are very much driven in many respects by the cost of pharmaceuticals. And so this has incredible implications in a much broader context. Even when we put aside the implications of the way that the TPP is being structured, so let's go through some of the myths that are both important in terms of the developing world and people getting access to medicine there, but also the ones that deal with the myths that we hear in this country in terms of what it will do to the development of new medicines if we were to revise our patent laws in such a way that made more sense.
Okay. That's a great question. I mean, let's take developing countries first, and then the very important question of the U.S. as well. So, most of those sales and most of the profits on medicines now are currently made in the rich countries of Europe, North America, and Japan. Approximately 75% of profits and over 70% of sales are actually earned in those rich country markets. And of course, they're earned there because Big Pharma charges higher prices in those markets. Now, developing countries, therefore, and India is 2% of the global market, and most poor countries are only a tiny fraction of the global market. What Big Pharma says is, well, we won't do research and development. We won't have money to do that if we can't continue to make maximum profits off every country in the world, including these countries that are very poor and a very small part of the global market. And that's basically nonsense. Big Pharma invests in research and development primarily for medicines that affect rich people in rich countries, so-called chronic disease medicines that people have to take every day, or medicines like those that treat cancer and at least extend people's lives. And the system currently does not incentivize research in what are called neglected tropical diseases, the kind of diseases like dengue fever and sleeping sickness and other diseases that afflict 1 billion people in developing countries who are too poor to really pay for medicine developed through this very expensive patent system we have. So, the system doesn't give medicines for the priority needs of developing countries, and or it results in overpriced medicines that they can't afford, even for the chronic diseases for which there are incentives within the rich country markets. So, I mean, the basic economic point to get across is this decision in India or others like it in other countries will not shut down research and development on new medicines. That said, our system is currently very inefficient at producing therapeutically targeted medicines and improvements in medicines. What Big Pharma goes after are basically lifestyle diseases, baldness, impotence, those kinds of conditions, which are really not life and death matters. Or it tries to develop, what are called Me Too drugs to try to steal market share from another company that has a blockbuster for treating diabetes. So much of our research and development is essentially wasted on trying to extend patent monopolies or compete with another monopolist by grabbing a share of an existing market. And we have lots of conditions in which there's inadequate research and development. So I think the solution for the U.S. certainly one of them might be significantly tightening up patent standards and giving forcing companies to really focus on you know therapeutic gaps instead of Me Too drugs. But some people are arguing something I think makes a lot of sense, which is we ought to have one kind of market for innovation and another market for access. We ought to have grants and prizes to reward and incentivize researchers to make therapeutically important discoveries. And there ought to be people who make contributions along the way, and everything doesn't go to the winner through a monopoly. And then we ought to let those resulting discoveries be produced and sold near the cost of production by, good quality generic producers. There would be tremendous savings in our health system if we stop pharma from making, huge profit rates and they spend 2.5 times more on marketing and administration than they do in research and development. They take home more in profits than they spend in research and development, even after they paid for research and development. We have a system which is bloated that doesn't give us returns on the research and development made and wastes a lot of money that could otherwise be saved both in funding R&D and in paying for the resulting discoveries.
All right, Professor, let's just unpack this because I want to really be clear with this because this is so on one hand, we see that developing countries which suffer from diseases that developed countries don't suffer. They don't get the type of research development dollars because there's not the market incentive for these companies to develop those things. And so the idea that you're talking about these two different markets, to make this a little bit more digestible for us, just walk us through this. So there would be a system set up that would be ostensibly funded by governments that would target the development of drugs for based upon the needs that exist with human disease, as opposed to the requirements, or I guess the incentives that a marketplace would. In other words, you use dengue fever, it's not as profitable to develop something for dengue fever because there are people in this country who really want a full head of hair, and they're willing to pay, and they have the capacity to pay more for it than those people who are suffering from dengue fever.
Right. So you're right. There really are two issues. There's one that there's totally neglected research areas. We actually have a neglected research area in antibiotics now because people only take them for 10 days. Most of the major drug companies have dropped out of creating new antibiotic medicines because they don't think they'll make enough money. And suddenly we're in a position where hospitals have untreatable bacterial infections. So our system doesn't produce medicines according to therapeutic need. They produce medicines by what will give them the most monopoly profits that they try to extend by getting evergreen patents, et cetera.
And so let me just stop you there. So this process, by lowering the bar for new patents or patents to be essentially extended, we're actually disincentivizing companies from doing research into areas which would provide us with better health.
Absolutely. For us domestically and certainly globally in terms of neglected diseases. There's lots of improvements to medicines that we would still want, but the question is whether you're going to give a 20-year monopoly and allow a company to charge whatever the market will bear to get it. The new cancer medicines and what they're calling individualized medicine, they want $100,000 or a couple $100,000 a year for those treatments. You're right in what you said earlier. Our country can't afford that. Our government can't afford it, especially in an era of austerity, and especially when U.S. workers, still need to compete to some extent on global markets, and the costs of their health care are so exorbitant. So, we have a ton of wastage in our system, particularly with respect to medicines, but in other medical expenses as well. And there's a solution. We could say, well, instead of giving exclusive rights and the right to monopoly profits that restricts access to poor people, both domestically and globally, who can't afford them, why don't we, take some of the savings we'd give from not having that monopoly system, pour it into research and development, focus on neglected diseases, focus on antibiotics, focus on preventive medicines, including vaccines, focus on areas where we don't yet have medicines, and why don't we really get the medicines we need from the scientists who are capable of doing it, but then assure that people who need the medicines and the governments that pay for it can afford it. Our system now really doesn't do either task very well.
And so, not to put too fine a point on it, but if we were to shrink or to raise the bar on extending these patents, or even to shrink the term of patents, what it would do is you'd still have these pharmaceutical companies making profits, but they would also seek profits in other areas that are underserved right now, because it would almost sort of level the playing field and keep the playing field from spiking in certain areas that are simply inefficient.
Right. I think there'd be a big difference. You'd have a whole bunch of research scientists working in different kinds of organizations, lots of them the small ones that are currently exist. You'd have a method for doing the last stage research and development, the clinical trials to make sure the medicine is safe and effective and of good quality. Once that was determined, then you'd have another whole industry that would basically produce and sell. What you get rid of are these bloated big pharma companies that are mainly about marketing, mainly about sending sales reps out to talk to every doctor in the world. And, a huge waste of resources, both in trying to extend their patent monopolies and on trying to, get a sales advantage by pestering doctors and putting ads on TV during news broadcasts. So, we need a new system. But I want to kind of go back to the point that we started with, which is the crisis in developing countries is much more severe even in the U.S. And Big Pharma and the U.S. government, through the U.S. Trade Representative, are seeking to impose longer, stronger, and broader patent monopolies on medicines in every country in the world, including our own. And we have to fight back. The activists in India and an international coalition of treatment activists, particularly AIDS activists, of which I'm a member, have fought for years to support India in adopting strict standards of patentability and then to protect their use. We are under threat because Big Pharma, Novartis, and the U.S. government continue to try to secure monopoly protections that will hurt patient access to life-saving medicine. And
the argument that someone would make, well, if you diminish the profits in any fashion for these companies, they will not make these, they will not discover these new drugs. We will not push the boundaries.
They will have some less money from poor countries, but poor countries aren't the place they make most of their money. Now, they are hoping to make more money, and the projections are they will continue to make increasing amounts of new profits in what are called pharma emerging countries like China and Brazil and India, the kind of big middle-income countries. That's where a lot of their growth comes in the future. But what I'm also saying is that the current system is nuts. We are wasting so much money to protect this bloated monopoly-based system, and we could get better research for less money, producing better medicines, if we dropped the monopoly system and went to a different kind of incentive system. Now, we have to have some, the U.S. Constitution is actually a bit of a problem in the U.S. We're supposed to have some period, but of protection for copyright and patents. But internationally, the big problem is this, TRIPS agreement that was passed under WTO with the assistance of the U.S. IP industries. But the world has to come to a better accommodation. The U.S. has to be a part of that accommodation to say medicines are a global public good. We cannot treat them like we're treating bicycles. We may want to give monopolies on bicycle parts and inventions, but we shouldn't do it for medicines. And it will be possible to come up with a system whereby inventors give up what are otherwise patent rights for basically prizes and grants. And the resulting discoveries will be more widely available at a much more affordable price.
And when we talk
It's
about
cost-
we talk about the constraint on some type of reform in this country, because the Constitution calls for patents to ensure that we have some type of we have incentives to invent new medicines. But really, what we're talking about in this country at this point is well beyond that. It is
Oh yeah,
we're talking
hugely
about
beyond.
a tremendous
We're
amount of
way
patent
beyond the
abuse.
constitutional minimum.
Right.
Believe me, we are light years beyond what was thought. And what we discover is we're not there. Our research and development isn't very efficient. And in some sectors, the patent system is actually getting in the way. We hear about patent trolls. We hear about patent thickets. We hear about patents on research platforms.
On
We hear
podcasts,
about
actually.
patents on genes. I mean, things that make no sense whatsoever and actually get in the way of ongoing innovation.